Welcome to Form and Function from Afar, our 3-day online conference in the book and paper arts. I'll introduce Nancy Jacobi in a minute and hand it over to her, but first I want to acknowledge our sponsors who made it possible for us to offer this virtual conference to you all for free. We have 10 fabulous sponsors listed on our conference site. Please check out what they're sharing in the virtual vendor fair and see what they have to offer by following the links to their websites. I'd like to tell you a bit about Book Paper Thread. We're a collaboration of myself, Linda Marshall, as well as Andrew Hewitt and Karen Hardy. When all of our in-person teaching gigs were canceled or postponed last year, we realized we'd have to change the way we taught. We met regularly to share our ideas and resources on how to best do that remotely. We launched our first online workshops last August and have been growing our catalog of courses, learning how to do it better each time we teach. We cover a variety of topics in the book and paper arts and offer different styles of workshop, from pre-recorded 6-week courses to live weekend workshops. We hope you'll be interested in exploring a workshop with one of us. And now to introduce Nancy Jacobi and her presentation, Artist Books and Japanese Papers, Lessons in Patience, Paste, and Possibility. I met Nancy Jacobi when I was a teenager. My mother was an artist, and we would go to Nancy's tiny gem of a store on a plain stretch of Queen Street West in Toronto. It was called the Japanese Paper Place. I was a teenager a very long time ago, but about 7 years ago, by chance, I was reminded of the Japanese Paper Place when visiting Strasbourg, France, and saw the window display of a stationery store that was filled with products from the Japanese Paper Place. Could it possibly be the same company? On a visit to Toronto to visit my mother, I called Nancy Jacobi. Sure, she would not remember me, but perhaps my mother. I wanted to tell her that it was so impressive that she had turned that tiny retail store into a company with some kind of global reach. And indeed she had. It all began in 1975 when the Japanese Paper Place seed was planted in Nancy Jacobi's mind during her year teaching in Japan. Surrounded by exquisite papers she had never seen before, she imagined the creative power that could be unleashed by their availability back home in Toronto. Starting with visits to printmakers, bookbinders, and specialty stores, she gathered the consensus she needed to start in earnest, stocking and promoting at first katazomeshi, stenciled handmade papers, and natural washi, traditional undyed papers. In 1982, she opened a small store where one by one washi users and advocates were launched. Through regular workshops, exhibitions, talks, and articles, the word was out that Japanese paper had great creative potential. Since then, a worldwide distribution network has grown to include art supply and museum stores, printmaking studios, packaging and bookbinding companies, amongst others. She has inspired an amazing number of artists and craftspeople to explore their creativity with outstanding papers handcrafted in Japan, always encouraging them in her quiet but assured way that their work will be so much more when they use heritage washi. And she will tell you more about that today. For 40 years, Nancy has been a tireless advocate for the hand paper makers in Japan and remains committed to the ideal of encouraging creativity with the finest quality Japanese papers made, following a 1,400-year tradition of excellence. Enjoy the presentation and enjoy meeting Nancy if you haven't already. Thank you for joining us.
And Karen for the gift of this really incredible conference. And the response to it is testament that it really is a great gift to the world of book and paper artists. And so thank you very much for allowing me to take part. This is very thrilling for me to talk to you. So we'll start the next slide. slide there. Okay. All right. So this is the wonderful Moriki family who I have had the good fortune to meet when I was in Japan teaching English in 1975. Through their generosity and patience, this is Mr. Shinji Moriki, and now his son Takao and his wife Shinobu have taken over the business very ably and continue to introduce me to the people I really want to support in Japan. Kayoko Moriki has also been very instrumental in my knowledge, my picking up knowledge and knowing about paper. So to all of the Morikis, thank you very much. Mr. Moriki passed away last year, very sadly, but he had a good run and made a big difference to the world of paper making in Japan. So when many people hear the term Japanese paper, all over the world, they think of this paper, which is chiogami, made in many, 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 many patterns and colors, thousands of them, and used by basically bookbinders and people who make things, cartonnage in France, to give joy to whoever are the recipients. These particular little bird houses, decorative bird houses, were made for Christmas ornaments by Megan Sproul, who works here at the Japanese Paper Place, but who has those wonderful hand skills that go hand in hand with chiogami. But what I'd like to talk about today are papers that are not so immediately dazzling as chiogami, but very, very much worth saving, worth using the best quality you can while they are still being made. As many of you will know, there's a huge range of quality in Japanese paper. Some of it, even though it comes from Japan, is just pure unadulterated wood pulp, probably imported from Oregon or BC or Norway. And those papers are really inexpensive because they don't require any preparation of the fiber. So what I'd like to urge you to do today, whether you're a book artist or a printmaker or a paper dyer, I'd like to encourage you to try the very best papers that you can. We like to call those papers heritage washi because they're made the same way as they were 1400 years ago, only a little bit better probably because they know more about it now. So one of the reasons I like to promote heritage washi, aside from its great potential as an art material, is that it takes place in places like this, where the ground that is used to grow the fiber, the water that is used to soak the fiber, everything about those environments is really observant of nature and of the plight we're in the world today. And so I feel it's my little bit that I can do to support a good earth, a continuing earth in the hands of people who really care about it. So that was the paper making place of the Ozaki family, who make Seicho-sen, Kozo, and Seiko-sen Mitsumata in 3 sizes, just a fantastic paper, and you'll hear more about them a little later. This is Mr. Imai, who has a wonderful football field-sized Kozo field. And here he is at the beginning of the season, of the papermaking season, cutting down the branches of kozo from the bushes. So Japanese paper is made mainly from 3 fibers: kozo, which is this, gampi, and mitsumata, those 3 fibers. And each of them have particular attributes. Kozo is the main fiber that's used. Probably 80% of the heritage washi that we get is made from kozo. It grows, though it's a renewable resource, so we don't have to kill the trees to get kozo. It will regenerate in a year. Mitsumata, often in 2 years, and gampi has never been able to be cultivated. It just resists cultivation, even though many people have tried over many years. And so the problem, this is kind of a big problem right now, the problem of fiber. It's very difficult to have enough of this really good local kozo. And you can see there in the left-hand side of this slide, the sort of paved places, not paved, but kept place between the rows of kozo. And so this has to be really tended. It's like an orchard, only it's huge, the size of a football field. And if it's not tended, then the quality of the fiber isn't as good. So it's really a year-round process. And Mr. Imai and his family in Oguni are tremendous supporters of these good practices, these healthy practices for the earth and for the artist. So once the fiber is, the branches are cut, they will be bundled in these beautiful organized way, and they will be steamed for several hours to loosen the outer bark from the other barks. This is a community process. Everybody gets together. Often they put sweet potatoes on the steamer. They cook things, they talk, they chat, tell jokes. It's a wonderful time to be in Japan in a paper making place. Great conviviality and hard work. So they say that 90% of the work in a piece of really good Japanese paper, heritage washi, and if you can see the screen, you can see these are some of the heritage washi that we carry. But this, they say that 90% of the work in creating these sheets is in the preparation of the fiber, starting right here. In Western papermaking, on the other hand, it's kind of reversed. The work is in really forming the sheet, some work in preparation, but the large majority of skill of papermaking in the West is really in how well you form the sheet itself. So here, this is also in Oguni, where Mr. Imai is from. You can see he is tearing off the 2 layers of bark, which you can see at the bottom there, from the core branch of kozo. So he'll tear that off, and then he will start to work on these other barks to separate them. The core pieces will be used for craft. People make lamps out of them, beautiful lamps with washi lamp shades, with washi paper. Or they may be just burned. I've most often seen them used as a crop. As a craft material rather. So then these 2 inner layer barks, this is the outer green bark that is being peeled off here. So first the black bark, the outer bark has to come off. And then there's 2 more layers that need to be separated. This is a very, very painstaking, long work. And again, done by members of the community. Almost always in what I have seen, it's less so now, but traditionally, I think that was kind of a woman's work. Hopefully that's being shared more now. Then after the white bark, the innermost bark is separated, it will be soaked in outside, if they have an outside source, like this is the Ozakis again. And this is the wonderful clean mountain spring water that fills the pool that they made for this purpose many years ago. And it will be soaked, and they have to wait for a sunny day because this will also bleach the fiber a little bit and prevent the need to use chlorine bleach, which is not a good thing for the earth. And it will be several days, depending on the weather, that it will be left to soak like this. Then the fiber is ready for cooking. And this is where the difference in quality really, really comes to play. The fiber is one thing. Where the fiber comes from is very important. If it's local, it's been very well tended. If it's imported, especially from Thailand, it hasn't been tended. It's not something in the history there, that recent history, that seems to happen. So you get these little sprouts of other branches springing up, and it's hard for the paper makers to do this peeling of the barks. So here she is putting in soda ash into the cooking vat, and she'll add those, and it will be cooked for several hours in preferably soda ash or lime or wood ash or lye, and preferably not caustic soda. Caustic soda is very harsh. It breaks down the fiber. So if you're looking for strength, that will not give you the greatest strength. And it will also bleach the paper. The natural paper, the natural color of Japanese paper is something very special. And it's a sensitive thing, how to get that color. The only way really good paper should be bleached is either by sun or by water, and or snow. That's the third one. Then another huge painstaking way that takes awful patience is this taking the cheery bits, the black bark bits that have gotten left in the fiber. This is taken at Kashiki paper mill in Kochi Prefecture, a wonderful place where many years ago, almost 100, I guess now, the owner of the mill invented a machine that would imitate the action of a hand paper maker. So the fiber is put onto the screen, and then the screen is jiggled forward and back very, very, very slightly, but it creates that bonding of the fibers so that it will give strength, even though the paper is made by machine. It was a wonderful invention, and it creates fantastic paper. So their paper is available in every weight from 3.7 gram up to 70 odd gram paper. And you'll see some examples of work on that paper. But it's wonderful to have these sort of meter wide rolls available in all these weights. Conservators use this paper a lot. Some of it is slightly dyed, the color of old books. It's really terrific. And this is the Kashiki mill. We like to support them. The son has taken over now, and they do wonderful things to support their community there too. And then the last step, so after, no, this isn't the last step. The next step is to pound the fiber so that it's cooked now, but it needs to be softer and more spread out to be able to be made into a handmade sheet. These days, it's rare to see pounding of the fiber. There's one area many of you have probably used, sekishu banshi tsuru and mare. Those are two different papers from sekishu, and the grade that is called tsuru is pounded by machine, electric machine that just act like the human pounder. But the hand pounding one is sekishu banshi mare, M-A-R-E, and that gives you a much not quite so fine a paper. And you'll see some examples later of sekishu, the fine sekishu used. It's a very popular one if you want to do interleaving or have some see-through. But the grade that is hand pounded has a bit more tooth because the fibers aren't completely mashed, which is a good thing for strength. They haven't been broken down as much. But that was something that I learned fairly recently. So here's the crunch. This is a 6th generation paper maker. His son will be the 7th, and he's making Mitsumata paper that has some natural dye in it, some bengara. And the Mitsumata tissue that we have in 2 weights is from this paper maker. You can see he has put the screen into the vat, and he can pull it off once he's got the desired weight. And you can see how flexible this paper will be because it's made on this flexible mat. And to get it off, he just puts it down. There's nothing in between the sheets. The hibiscus root that is liquefied and added to the vat causes that to be able to happen. Oops. So then after that, it will be dried, brush dried, and sometimes on heritage washi, you can see the mark of the brush or the mark of the board that it was brushed on. And some artists use those features to inspire their work. Here, this is a slide from Kochi about the turn of the 19th century, where almost every person who lived in Kochi, tens of thousands of people, was working in the world of paper making. At this time, one of the main uses of the paper was mimeographs, yes. So they would ship it around the world. Mimeographs were new, and the paper was essential to creating a copy before typewriters really became popular. So that's the process. And what that process, if it's carried through in the ways that we just showed, you will get heritage washi. Washi made so that it is kind to the earth and will last at least 1,400 years. There are examples in Japan of paper that are 700 and some years old, and they look amazing still. We have many, many heritage washi papers here, and we have other papers too. I was talking about names a few minutes ago. A paper like Masa, which seems to be everywhere now, is basically pure wood pulp, bleached with chlorine, made by machine. There is a version that's sized called Masa Dosa, and that one is good for watercolor. But if for the kinds of things that you may want to do with washi, if you're interested in Japanese paper, I really encourage you to try and get the highest percentage of that bark that you can. Heritage washi is all 100% local kozo, 100% local mitsumata, or 100% local gampi. They will give you the best absorption. They will give you the greatest strength if you're conserving, doing hinging or whatever. They will be the most wonderful papers to use, the feel of them, the sound of them sometimes. They give you great pleasure. And in a time like this, when joys are few and far between as the world recovers from this pandemic, to handle these excellent papers, it sort of puts you in touch with another human world in Japan. So now what we're going to do is look at some of the traditional uses of the paper in order to learn what those special characteristics are. And I hope that, and then I'm going to show you some samples of inspired work using those characteristics, hoping that you too will try your hand, try to see the difference between papers that are heritage washi and others. So this was the first use of the paper after it was imported to Japan in the year 610 by Buddhist monks who came from what is now Korea, and with the paper. So they brought sumi ink too to Japan, I think. I'm not sure about that. I have to check that. But anyway, to use it for writing sutras was the thing. So the absorbency was very particular to sumi ink and still is. The best Japanese papers are not sized. If you want papers to be sized, usually you have to learn how to do it yourself. And Suzanne Moore will talk about that, I'm sure, in her session tomorrow, or tonight rather. The other quick use of the paper was for lanterns to light the way. And you can see here, this is an old, I'm not sure what period it's from, maybe Edo, looks Edo, and you can see the paper that would be used there was not the best quality. It's a bit dark, but it doesn't matter for this. In that time, they were just needing to be lit. And of course, shoji, the sliding paper doors that they love in Japan, and we increasingly love here. And here's where the color of the paper becomes very important. So in this case, this is Kado Ide paper in Niigata Prefecture. And he bleaches the paper in snow. They get a lot of snow there, much like Toronto is today. And many of the places that you're in the States, I know you've had quite a week. So the color is it's a very specific thing for each project. And I think if those of you who are printmakers understand that. And the more you use good Japanese paper, the more you absolutely relate to that wonderful human color. This is an example of that. So the ability to transmit light is one of the great features of Japanese paper. This is a byobu, a folding screen, and this inspires all kinds of work, has for centuries since then, including many of you who do accordion fold books. So its ability to fold, it's wonderful, as Hedy Kyle has always known and points out in her books. Japanese paper, especially those pure ones, are amazing folders. They're so strong, you can fold them back and forth and back and forth. And the other thing that this slide would show is that the surface is wonderful for painting. So this would be painted Nihonga style, which is using pigments and often rabbit skin glue. It's still wonderful for painting, but it's not going to paint like Western watercolor paper because it's different and you have to kind of play with it to find your way. But lots of wonderful paintings can be done on Japanese paper. And another inspiration from the fan, one thing I learned about researching for this talk today is that in a fan, the more pleats you have, the more folds, the more it shows your high status, just in case you need to know that. And lastly, no, not quite lastly, umbrellas, again, an example of that wonderful foldability of Japanese paper and its strength. These umbrellas can go for a long time with being folded and unfolded. And this slide, thanks to Linda Marshall, is a terrific one showing the prevalence of those two things, umbrellas and lamps, in older Japan. So there he is writing with sumi ink on the umbrella before it would be treated with some things. Maps, this is a slide from I took at the Art Institute of Chicago, showing an Edo period map of Tokyo. And this is written on and with sumi ink and stamped with no doubt something natural. And it's pretty beautiful, isn't it? Try sumi ink. It's a very special marriage with the paper. Kakejiku and Imakimono, the tale of Genji, these are scrolls. And in most Japanese houses, you see scrolls. You don't see framed pieces. That's a Western thing. But in Japan, you'll see scrolls like this in the tokunoma, a special area where the guests are allowed to sit in, and they could see the wonderful paintings. And this is 11th century, the tale of Genji. And it's a much narrower, it's a narrow scroll that goes out and tells the whole tale of it. So when these new uses of paper gradually became part of the culture, with them grew the use of several materials that are just now making their way back into the to our culture, because what they did is they facilitated the practical uses of those papers. This is Jin shofu, which I know many of you use. It's paste. It's paste, wheat paste that has had the lignin removed, so it's never going to yellow. This is what they've been using in Japan, really, since they brought paper over. And you can see it's cooked. This is from a workshop that we had in mounting papers. We've had it many, many times, and it's a great use. And one thing I'd just like to note here is that often people refer to gluing when they really mean pasting. This is reversible. It will go on forever without yellowing. It is the safest possible thing. And I know it's in competition often with PVA. And I know you have to use PVA sometimes if you're sticking things that don't want to be stuck. But in this case, what my advice is to use the lightest adhesive you can. This is much lighter than any other plastic-based adhesive. So where you can, use Jin shofu and save the PVA for those very hard to nail down adhesions. The other thing that came over with paper, or soon was realized after it came, was kakishibu. And Linda Marshall will be doing a wonderful workshop in this. I think it's this weekend or next weekend. These are ripe persimmons. And if you go to Japan in the fall, you'll see wonderful valleys full of these persimmons, which cling after all the leaves are gone. And what they use for the persimmon juice, the tannin, is unripened persimmons, which are green, and then they are fermented. And they make this wonderful dye for the paper. And also, it strengthens the paper and it waterproofs it. So firemen's coats are sometimes made with washi that's been treated with kakishibu. Umbrellas too, many things where you want to keep water at bay. This is from the house in Oguni, Mr. Imai's house. And these are old floor mats. So washi, if it's really good, heritage washi, it can be sat on for years. So these are floor mats that are made from old accounting books. And these are quite wonderful. The way that they keep these accounting books together, they do them in signatures, and then they just pile them up and sew them signature by signature. And sometimes you see in the markets there, in the antique markets, account books that are this high, where they've been piled up with all the transactions. But this was very exciting. I hadn't seen the use of the kakishibu like this until that particular trip many years ago. Let's see here. So that's, you can see there, that's other, it doesn't look like accounting books there. Maybe that was some other old, but they recycle the paper. That's the beauty of Japanese paper too. Its strength and its characteristics mean you can do many things with it over and over. Very non-wasteful. Cushions, this is treated with kakishibu and also with another one of these favored additions called konnyaku. And again, Linda Marshall will be offering a workshop in konnyaku, and I'll show you later some wonderful things that have been done with konnyaku. What konnyaku does is it makes the paper, if you knead it, if you crumple it after it's dry, or even when it's wet, if you give several coats, it will make it more malleable. If you're going to stitch, if you wanted to stitch something with it, that's a great thing to use. Here, these cushions have been coated with kakishibu and then konnyaku. It's wonderful stuff. So this is a stencil, and this is another use of kakishibu, because this is they're stenciling kimonos here. But these old studios that used to produce kimonos when kimonos were worn by everybody practically, women that is. They have been, some of them converted into printing chiogami and katazomeshi for paper. And so the screens are dosed with kakishibu because they will be wet a lot, and that protects them from wearing out so fast. So this is katazomeshi. This is what is printed now using those same kakishibu dyed stencils. Beautiful things. These are old ones, which we don't have so many of anymore, but they were the early ones that I imported 40 years ago. And they're terrific to use for books and boxes and such. This is kind of a hybrid slide I wanted to put in because it's part of a show now in the British Museum, a show on the Arctic around the world. Wouldn't you just love to get there to see it, because it looks like something wonderful. So this is by Alexa Hatanaka, who is an artist in Toronto, but she lives part of the time up in Cape Dorset, where the Inuit have been printing on Japanese papers for 70 years or so. And this is inspired by kamiko, which were robes that were made of washi for the priests, and they were very, very warm in the winter. Washi has a great insulating property. So she saw the relationship between the kamiko robes and these parkas, and this is part of that exhibition. And it's wood block print, and she has worked with the youth up there. And this is ink that they made from iron ore. What a wonderful thing. So now to look at how some other artists have used what we learned from Japanese art and materials, starting with this, which is a scroll, whoops, made by Reg Beatty. This was actually made as a sample for a workshop that got canceled because of the pandemic. And it's nice to have it, but I thought it would be really interesting for people to use this more. Imagine if you're taking a show somewhere and you can have it on a scroll like this, and then just put 5 of them in your bag and off you go. And then when you get there, you unscroll them and there they are. So I think this is very much something that could happen. And the paper that you put in the middle could be appropriate for whatever you wanted to do, painting with sumi ink or colored pencil work or collage or whatever you fancy. And the colored papers there at the end are just rolled over dowels, very, very small dowels. And then there's a tie that ties it all together. But the whole thing is only about maybe 7 inches, just a little gem. And here's another inspiration from Japanese scrolls. This is called a cranky, and this is Jane Lowbeer's, one of the pieces that was in a show that she had at a regional art gallery here. So the top of it is acetate, and where you see the colors, that is gouache and watercolor. And so as you turn the spools, then the colored part will continue on. She was moving from the city to the country, and this was a way for her to express how different it was and how she had to kind of keep on her toes, I'm sure, to handle it all. Quite a wonderful thing, and a great use of that inspiration. By the way, if you're a drawer or a painter, and I hope that some of you will decorate your own paper after this in ways that you can see will work, and not always buy the pre-decorated paper. Gouache is a wonderful thing. It doesn't need sizing usually. And so I recommend a good quality gouache very much. And soft pencil, soft colored pencil. You'll have your own brands that you like for those things. But if you're using good Japanese paper, use the best art materials you can as well, please. So again, inspired by the use of the translucent feature of Japanese paper, these days, in the old days, it was just for light, but now we don't really need extra light. We have a lot of it with these terrible things on the ceiling, these neon light, these fluorescent lights. But this is a very traditional style lamp, but it's got these Sogara Yuzen kind of chiyogamis in them, and it's just brilliant. The making of that. So this is a kind of a merging of two cultures. And this is a father and son who are wonderful violin makers who also make things with wood. Now this is, and I know on the preamble that somebody mentioned the store in Montreal that is called Au Papier Japonais in French, the place of Japanese paper. And they are a wonderful distributor of ours in Montreal to artists and conservators and anyone who likes fine things. Lorraine herself is a terrific artist. And she did this for a show that we had called Let There Be Light. And this was using Matsuo kozo, which is a thin kozo from Yame from Fukuoka. And unfortunately, that family has stopped making paper, but we found another supplier now to make what we call somegami, just dyed paper. But nevertheless, it's very thin. So she worked with ink, sumi ink, and pens and things to make marks in it. And then she just crumpled it. I always thought she had put konnyaku on this to make it kind of remember the shape, but she didn't. She just crumpled it on a cylinder so that it kept the shape. But I thought these were just wonderful, and they show the characteristic of the paper to be malleable and obedient. You can kind of make it into whatever you want. Beautiful lamps. Now, this is a piece. Beth last night was saying how she liked works that made her laugh. She liked to see the humor in artworks. I do too. And this one is from many years ago. I think he did it when we have had many exhibitions in various places. And I can't remember what this was for, but this is Don Taylor is the artist. He's a wonderful bookbinder. He's our go-to guy in Toronto for anything to do with books. Marvelous. But he has a wonderful sense of humor too. And he made this when computers and technology and the expectations that those things had upon us was scaring him. He didn't like it. He wanted to bind books. So this was his work, and it is called Laptop Secretaire. When you open it up, this is what you get. Inspired by the translucence of Japanese paper, here it is. Beautifully crafted. It has leather on the edges, and this paper is from Sekishu, and this would be Sekishu Banshi Tsuru, because it's very fine, and it was done with kakishibu in Japan. It also is a wonderful dye to use. But isn't that fun? And Katagami, he's used that stencil paper for covering the box itself. Let's see how my time is doing here. Okay. Now this is an interesting piece where this is actually Philippine Gampi. The Gampi comes from the Philippines. It's not really Gampi. It's the closest thing they would have to Gampi. We call this Gampi Smooth. It's a machine-made paper, but it takes color just beautifully. And this artist, what she does is she uses beeswax on this Gampi Smooth. You could use it on any Gampi. And she covers it with beeswax, coats it with liquid beeswax, lets it dry, and then she goes in with various tools and she makes what she calls a hack etching. So she cuts into it with various things, and then she puts color on some of them. She would do these in pieces and then stitch them together later. They could become a lamp, or it can just sit flat as a book, as it did in that last slide. She can manipulate it many ways. It's a fun thing. So what she likes to use for these, in terms of dyes, she uses a lot of textile dyes. She comes from a textile background, and so she uses them. And where she has put these marks with various wooden tools or pens or whatever, she will rub in ink, often textile inks, and you can see the different colors that she's used there. And but the way that this has accepted that color, probably would be before she put the wax on. But it's a wonderful thing to handle, and I think it has so much potential for almost like a Jacob's ladder or Rubik's cube. Something could become a wonderful treasure for kids, for instance. Her name is Mary Jane Varro, and she used to work here for some years. We miss her. And this is Will Reuter, who is our wonderful letterpress king in Canada, I would say. Just terrific. And so this is all hand-set letterpress. It's a book called Tout passe, Everything Passes in French. And it's a book that comes to represent the song that the Acadians, people who lived in the east of Canada in the 18th century, sang as they walked to their boats, where they were compelled to leave the country and seek out life somewhere else. And this is the song they sang as they walked. Oh, chokes me up even now. And a lot of them, I think, would have ended up in Louisiana, for instance, wherever there's French colonies on coasts. And but what's beautiful about this book is that Will did this. This is a lino cut, and he's used 3 different Japanese papers because he wanted it to be quite stable. So one more slide. So he did, this is a lino cut, and then underneath it on another piece of washi, he did another very faint print of the path to show what they were leaving behind. And it's just a remarkable piece of work. It has many more pages, but I treasure it. And in another way, this is Janet Potter's piece. These are photo transfers on Yame Kozo Hadaura, which is a paper from Fukuoka in many slightly different tones. And she was bemoaning the fact that all these places on the foot of Vancouver Island in British Columbia, that they were all being torn down because of developers coming in and buying the land. And so she did this, and I think this is such an interesting form. It doesn't stand up by itself, but it's meant to be looked at, and it's meant to be shown like this. And I find the paper really reflects that kind of sadness, that kind of weakness of that sort of community that seems to be taken over. The idyllic life seems to be taken over by something that is more about abundance and amount. This piece is a tour de force. This is by Bryan, who very, very sadly passed away last year. And she was a wonderful bookbinder, teacher. She lived in Newfoundland and was extremely active and inspiring to many, many people there. So this is a book about Down the Rabbit Hole. The story is part of it. It folds up and turns into what looks from the top like this. And it's a tunnel book. And you can see the words all the way down to the very bottom. It's just a beautiful book. And she's separated the levels of the tunnel with, again, Matsuo Kozo, How We Miss It. But this is thin Kozo paper, very well made, so it can stand all that accordioning of it. And we are very lucky to have this in our possession. She actually gave us this copy before she died. So it's very, very moving for us to have it. Another thing that I think we can learn from the Japanese aesthetic is just sort of the tactility of things. This is a book by George Walker, letterpress, also a wonderful letterpress printer. These are wood engravings, 100 wood engravings of the hours before 9/11. So the engravings are about people going about their jobs, filing, having their morning coffee, etc. But it's all printed on Yuki Gampi, wonderful paper that is feels beautiful. Gampi has a sleekness to it that is just irresistible. And it's often used by people in books where they want to really startle you into that feeling of luxury and humanity. So this was a great book. And the paper maker who made it is this man, Hiroshi Tamura. And this was during World Washi Summit that we held in 2008, and we invited several paper makers with the help of the Japan Foundation and the Moriki family and many, many artists who came with their works. We had many, many venues, I think 60 or 70 venues who agreed to show paper. But George presented this copy of the Book of Hours to Hiroshi. And you can see the tear in his eye. He cried. He was so excited to see where his paper ended up. And that's something that I really like to promote. And I hope that you can, wherever your community is, that you can also somehow make connection with the paper makers by email or whatever. A lot of them have websites now. And maybe you can organize something, some of the things like we did. We've had exhibitions just on one paper, like sekishu or oguni papers. And the makers really want to see what you're doing with the paper. So do it well, choose the best, and then let's see what can happen there. Maybe through the Guild of Bookworkers or something. Be wonderful. This is a slide of Suzanne, a slide that I took of Suzanne Moore's experiments with washi, with thin washi. This is a few years ago, I think, at a Guild of Bookworkers convention. And she said, when I asked her if I could show this today, she said, oh yes, that would be fine. She said, I think it's good for people to see what it takes to create work sometimes, all the experimentation that goes into it. You look at her beautiful books and you think, wow, but you have no idea that there was this much preparation for it. But it's a lovely, lovely pile. And one of the few people who really worked. And so when that slide actually, this slide, when she showed me, she came over to, I was in the vendor room there, and she came over and showed this wonderful pile of papers, and I took a picture, and she was just glowing because she had discovered something that would allow her to do all this wet media on the paper, on Japanese paper. And it was golden varnish. And that's still what she uses. I would love, and I mentioned to her, to see more people using konnyaku, devil's tongue root, this powder, for this purpose of sizing. We need to find some really good organic things to size with. And this is one of her beautiful pages of her book. And I think here she's used gampi tissue. It must be, because this reverse word here, which is immeasurable, is completely visible. She's printed it on the other side of this gampi tissue, which when you come to it in a book is a magnificent little gift. Now, this is a newer piece from the Art of the Book 2018 in Canada, which unfortunately, it had beautiful, beautiful Japanese paper examples in it of artists' books. It was very encouraging to see that, but this one was outstanding. And you can see it was called Alzheimer, and the E is here and the R is falling off the side. But when you get inside, this is tosa usushi paper. So this is kozo that's been made by Thomas Tamura, the one who had the wooden graving paper, Yuki Gampi. And I guess we all, as we get older, we all have this in our lives, our aunts or uncles or grandmothers who can't remember these three things, and the medical staff go through with them. Try and remember these three things: lemon, flower, bird. Very clear on this tosa usushi, which prints beautifully. And then after a few minutes, they're asked to try it again: bird and lemon. Okay, things are dropping down. Then the next visit, all that's left is bird. And underneath the piece of tosa usushi is a very battered looking Zymer. But just such a simple concept, so beautifully expressed. This was sekishu, not tosa usushi. This is sekishu toshi, sekishu banshi tsuru, so the fine version of it. Just a lovely way to express something very, very dramatic. Frances Hunter, also from BC. This is a pamphlet that she did to honor an artist and person in BC who had grown up in the Okanagan Valley. She was an artist and apparently a very interesting person. So this was her book to that. And this is also Sekishu Banshi Tsuru. It gets a lot of play because it's such a wonderful paper. And this is the Kuretani Kozo. We have some wonderful papers from Kuretani. That's one. And some of you from the GBW, if you've been around for some time, will remember Eva van Brugel from Holland. She came several years with her beautiful papers using bacon fat, as I recall. And she died quite a few years ago, but in the process, I gave her some sekishu paper to try. And she'd made these wonderful sheets that could turn these corners on very, very thin board that she used for the boxes. So she did mixed leather and the marbling inks. and has them in between the pages of this book. This is Western paper, and I think the juxtaposition of Western and Eastern paper is very effective. It's not that I think people should use Japanese paper for everything. I don't, but when it comes as a surprise, it's just such a lovely thing. And this is an artist who lives half time in Athens and half Athens, Greece, and half time in London. And she does these remarkable artist books with graphite drawings that are so detailed and so delicate and believable. And she has them bound into books, just one. So as you turn the pages of this one, for instance, on the left-hand side, whoops, no, not yet. Then the crowd will disappear, and you see the change in the humans, and people leave. There's one book where the boat is leaving the mainland of Greece, and as you turn the pages, the land becomes further and further away because there are more pages of Gampi tissue. It's a remarkably unique way to work with washi and Gampi tissue. Gampi is becoming very expensive, the fiber for the paper makers to buy. So it's so special. And if you haven't been introduced to Gampi, try and find somewhere where you live and just see what it will do. Rembrandt was the first user of Japanese Gampi, and he loved it. It was well on in his career, but he did some beautiful etchings. It will take up the line of anything, graphite pencil or etching or pen or whatever, but it's a very special material, and it's going to be hard to keep it being made. It's hard to make, and as I mentioned before, the fiber has to be got in the wild, and nobody really wants to do that very much now. Okay, so this is again Tosa Usushi, a wonderful paper, and you can print almost any kind of print on a good Japanese paper. So this is Penelope Stewart's book called Botanique. No, this one. And one of the things that I think Penelope loves, and many other people who do books love, is the way the drape of a good Japanese paper falls when the book is open, especially if it's a horizontal book. And it's just so contained, so neat, and so simply beautiful. Here's Will Reuter again and Reg Beatty, who did this collaboration some time ago, letterpress, and this is woodblock print on the bottom section of the book, and it's kind of an interesting use. This is Mr. Kubota, who was alive when I first visited Sekishu many years ago, and at that time he was teaching paper making to the Bhutanese. A wonderful man, and look at that beautiful sumi shodo behind him, the writing. But he also apparently brought back to the attention of people the fact that the Sekishu size, which is 21 inches by 29 inches, I think, is the specifically Sekishu size. And that's why I have to get some more information about that, but it was interesting to know. I had just learned that by researching. Maps, you saw the map of Tokyo before. This is Laurie Ovens, a printmaker, but a textile artist, a wonderful user of the papers in many, many, many ways, makes lots of wonderful books and prints. This is, she calls it field map. It's the size of a full sheet of paper that she has etched and dry pointed and then folded, put lots of konnyaku on it, and then it folds up like an accordion fold, and then it folds up again like a map. But it's a lovely thing, and I was thinking, wouldn't that be nice to just have in a practical way on a messy shelf or something? But beautiful work there. Reg Beatty's work that he did for the World Washi Summit, and this is 12 panels of accordion fold. He wanted to use a really good paper, which he did. That's Seichosen, you can see it there. And this was made in that beautiful first slide place of the compound with the fibers in the pool. He used plaster and stains, and then he pochoired, but he was really tough on the paper, and he said it just came out fantastically. So then it becomes like a wall. He can exhibit it like a wall with graffiti on it. Very special. Reg is a great user of Japanese paper and teaches, fortunately, at one of our universities here. His aesthetic for it. It seems like certain people really gravitate to use the paper, and some people will never. It doesn't fit in with their aesthetic sense. This is Don Taylor again, something he did for a show we had called The Power of Two, where we gave paper to 14 artists to do something on the surface of it, printmakers. This person is multi-talented artist, but this was drawing that she did. And lots of printmakers, watercolorists, calligraphers. And then they did something with it. We gave them very good Japanese heritage paper. And then we had a gathering. The 14 people came. We invited 14 other people who have other ways they use paper to choose by a draw one of the papers that had been one of the pieces that the surface artist had brought in. And so Dawn chose Susan Lobier's drawing here, and he, using the inspiration of the malleability of the paper, really, he made this what he called an electric bento box, and it still delights. This is a quilt project using up your squares of paper. So whatever you've got that didn't work, or ones that you didn't want to use for whatever you bought it for, this was a lovely way to use it. This is Liz Akins. She's basically a printmaker, but printmakers with Japanese paper never stay at printmaking. It's you do something on it and then you do something else with it, is sort of the way it goes. So Liz Akins, she had a friend who was learning Japanese calligraphy. And so she started konnyakuing squares. And then she lives out of town in a smaller community where quilting is a big thing. So she got the quilting people involved. And this filled a whole wall of a big gallery room. It was just a marvelous project. They did it in squares of 4 each. She gave them the squares and then they would go home and connect them. But it was a wonderful way to engage the whole community. And they didn't konnyaku it, as it turned out. She said it got so far and they hadn't figured out how to konnyaku it when it got that big. But she's still going to do something with it like that. So this idea of piecing together, that's what the Japanese always did in their castles and things, because they didn't have big paper in those days. The size of the paper today is a relatively modern thing. Just the last few slides showing you some pieces. So this is Paula, who is staff here at the Japanese Paper Place, and a haiku person. So this is her haiku with katazomi she covers. This is Laurie Ovens. These are almost like quilted. She silk screens and then she stitches. A lot of stitching is great with Japanese paper. It becomes very malleable. And this is Rebecca Cowan's Etching and Liz Menard's wonderful accordion book of the pond, another Laurie Ovens book. you can get very addicted to those books, as you could to Karen Kuntz's wonderful boxes. When I asked her if I could use this slide, when I saw it in the preliminary stuff, she said, yeah, sure. She said it was some of her studio members had done them with her, but I thought, using up bits like this, so you can see some of it is clearly print, that's clearly print. And she said some of it was just paper that I had, incidental paper from something, this looks like it's from an origami package. But just using up things, I think, what a wonderful way to create. And who has enough boxes? Not me. And this slide of Laurie Ovens' work. These are all konnyaku'd and multi-signatured, most of them. She uses those exposed stitching on the spine, but just endless. And we have her do a lot of workshops here. So if any of you would like to have any of these artists come and teach workshops once we can, it would be great. We'd love to share and have you come here and make it happen. So this is the Ozaki family, the first slide, and now the last slide. They're typical of why we want to keep promoting Japanese handmade paper, really good paper, because it's good for the earth, it's good for you, it's good for the families who have for generations been improving and working hard. And yeah, so Takao Moriki, who has been so helpful to us, has organized these 6, I think it's actually 7. I can get rid of that. But anyway, these people all make great heritage washi, the best way that it can be made. And so if you look on the site online, you can see what an attachment that has to do with heritage washi. All of these guys would be in that batch of paper. So let's make a pact to use the best paper that you can, know about it, find out about it, get it from somebody reputable, and then go for it. We are very lucky to have Linda Marshall, who distributes the paper and is anxiously learning about it wonderfully in the States. So if you're an artist or a conservator there, by all means, contact her. If you're somewhere else, look at our website and see where you can, where is close to you that you can get some paper. So that leaves a few minutes for questions.
Well, Nancy, that was an amazing presentation, really inspiring, such amazing, wonderful pieces, and everyone's saying lots of great things about how much they're enjoying.
Thank you. That's nice. That's what you hope, is to inspire.
So we only have a few minutes here, but let me see. So there was some questions early on about snow bleaching, how it affects the paper and what the process is.
They bleach it at the time that the barks are separated. So they get that what's called the white bark, but it's not very wet before it's sun bleached. And they have to wait for a lot of snow, and they will just stretch out these strips of bark along. You can look up this site, and you can see some pictures of his snow bleaching. It's oguni paper. Have a look and you'll see. And so it will be left out there, again, dependent on sun. And they need the sun to kind of bounce off the snow. And then it will just be treated like a normal batch of fiber.
Great. Is there a list of these heritage paper makers or more information about them?
Well, I think on what Linda had put on the site, that's a 2-sided thing, and one side, I guess it doesn't say too much about the paper makers. For now, I would say just that last slide that Takao put together of this little organization that is going to be really, really keeping to the tradition, I would say those are the ones that you want to support if you can.
Great.
Through, you know, through the Japanese paper place or Hiromi, or especially, I would say those two.
Mhm. There was a question about Moriki papers.
Yes.
Are still being made and available?
Moriki paper has a long history, that dyed Moriki paper that Dawn Etherington and you know, invented that way of attaching the covers with it. So originally it was made by hand. It was great paper, and then gradually it got sort of reduced in its quality. So now, but now, thank you to Takao, we have a wonderful, very good quality Moriki kozo made with Chinese kozo, but great colors. And very strong. It has a little bit of wood pulp in it, maybe just 10% or so, but it's really very good. And I know that's been hard. So if you're interested in Moriki kozo, look on our website. We keep that pretty much up to date. And you can order that through, you know, many dealers. We tend to concentrate on getting the paper out there in quantity to art supply stores or studios or whatever. But Moriki kozo is certainly one of the things that we know you will like if you're a bookbinder. So talk to Linda if you're American about that.
Great. So I think you've convinced us all, but there was a question about the usage of heritage paper in Japan, if it's growing and how popular it is with younger generations.
Well, that's a wonderful question. It's kind of like the answer is for another session. It's not, the whole use of Japanese paper is not very widespread in Japan, and that people don't know it. The young generation has not been really exposed to it. Even artists, when I was there, when I first went there, an artist gave me his woodblock printing tools because he said he was just going to be using arch paper and doing, you know, what was exciting for them because Japan was closed for so long. So yeah, it's not, it needs a lot of support in Japan too. And Takao is doing his best to organize things and support other organized things too. And if you can do that wherever you are, have a show of the power of two. We did that many times with classes too, with art college classes. That's a fun thing to do.
Great. And there's some question about different media on different Japanese papers. So so you can do gouache directly on the paper itself, or does it need dyes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have a lot of samplers now that are actually a package of paper for a particular use. So there's one for wet media and one for printmaking and calligraphy, all sorts. So if you tell us, we're happy to help you with the information, and then you go to your see if your local supplier or the one that you're used to using mail order will get it for you. And if not, I mean, we can help to make that happen. But if you tell us what you want to do, let us give you that information, because we have staff here who are very good too at knowing what it will do. It's a hard question. You just kind of have to play. We have a new product called Washi Kozo Mix. And it's a whole lot of different kozos, and it's just fun to play with.
That's great. Yeah, so there are some other questions about uses. So maybe we'll just refer them to your website or to you.
Yeah, they can just washi at JapanesePaperPlace.com. We'll get into the main branch. And if it's something specific, you can email me at Nancy@JapanesePaperPlace.com.
Right, great.
Linda's gaining a lot of knowledge, and it's very exciting.
Right. There was a question about availability in the UK. Do you supply to the UK, or do you know?
We do. And it's one of the few places that will carry a huge range of paper. I was just looking up their site this morning. So Shepherd's Bookbinding, which is near Victoria Station in London, they do lots of mail order. And for many, many years, they've been a great supporter of those good papers. and the English do some wonderful things on it too. I wish I'd had more examples from their clients, because I've gone and talked there, and people show up with these wonderful projects and posters, rock concert posters on washi. Wow.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. So you were recommending the Jinshofu wheat paste. Do you have kind of thoughts about it compared to the A stock B and how it's different, or how it's
A stock B?
The other
PVA?
versions of wheat starch paste. So
Oh,
there's
wheat starch paste. I can't say for sure. I think they're probably similar. I know the wheat starch paste is talked about as not having very much strength, but Jin shofu somehow, I mean, that's what conservators use in Japan and have for centuries. So I don't know. I need to kind of find that out,
okay.
how similar they are. It's not the same, but it's similar, and we want to know. If that person could just email me, I would be happy to find that out.
Okay, great. You mentioned the World Washi Summit. Is that, when it's going again, where that might be and how people can find out more?
Oh, wouldn't that be great? Well, we've thought about trying to work with Rob Shepherd to do one in London. It'd be fun to do it somewhere else. So if anybody has ideas about that, let us know, because I think that kind of collaboration, that was a really powerful event. And to get the paper makers to come was so great for them and so great for other people too. So we don't have a plan right now to hold another one. It's a lot of work, but boy, what a wonderful thing to do. So keep it in mind. I would suggest we could be very helpful to people who wanted to organize one wherever they are.
Right. Well, there are a lot of specific ones at this point. So I'm wondering, Nancy, if you might go ahead and be willing to check the continuing conversations area.
Sure.
More specific questions.
I
So
will.
maybe in the next couple of days, people can post specific questions.
Okay.
And that would be good.
Can I just show a couple of things if I got 1 minute, or is it?
Yeah,
time?
absolutely.
Okay. I just wanted to show, we had a customer in Belgium who came for the Washi Summit, actually, and she had been working with washi and leather. And I know that will be a combination that's familiar, chiogami and leather, really. So she made this wonderful bucket with washi leather, but this is konnyaku. So the surface of it is completely good to go forever. It'll be like leather. It'll probably outlast the leather. And this is another one of hers. Hilda, oh gee, why can't I think of her name? This is another beautiful bowl that has konnyaku chiogami in the middle, stitched, and she did, this is, can you see these things? This is leather inside this wallet, konnyaku, so it'll last forever and ever. One of Lori's beautiful books. This isn't leather, but I have to show you these. See, she's used bits of her printing papers that didn't quite work out the same way. But the idea of using up motai nai, as they say in Japan. Oh, here she did these little baby booties too. Konnyaku and leather. Fun. So that's what I wanted to show you about those. So I hope you'll let us know when you do wonderful things. We do social media in a little bit in fits and starts, mostly because of me, but we like to share with the world other people's things. So thank you all for your attention.
Nancy, thank you for a great presentation, and thanks to everyone in the audience for joining us and all the great questions. And once again, I'd like to thank our sponsors. We hope to see you in one of our classes at Book Paper Thread in the future. You can follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or join our email list. And here are a few upcoming classes. I'll be teaching about working with kakishibu and washi next weekend. Andrew will be teaching techniques for making books for photographers and printmakers starting on March 3rd. And Karen Hardy will be teaching the storage book beginning March 27th. You can find the recordings of this session and all the other sessions in the webinar tab in the classroom portal. And Nancy's presentation will be up later today. There's a PDF handout there, and we will add a list with the names and spellings of all the papers that she mentioned today in the presentation. And then you can hop over to continued conversation for the presentations, and under the tab Nancy Jacobi, we'll be able to address more questions that weren't answered in the chat and Q&A today. Our next session coming up at 1 o'clock is with Gina Pacello. This is a wonderful participatory demonstration of cut, pleat, and twisting paper. So grab some interesting paper from your stash. A two-sided paper works best, and join us for Gina's presentation. And then tonight at 7:30, Suzanne Moore will be presenting Beyond Pigment and Paste, New Dimensions in Paper. Thanks so much for joining us.